Om. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavati Tamastu Mavit Vishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So we're coming to the end of the 17th chapter. We may complete this week or next. And just to recap, so it's the threefold division of Shraddha. So the threefold is Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And what are we looking at? The threefold of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas: yagna, tapa, dana. The things the activities that we would do outside of ourselves. Yagna, tapa, dana. And ahara, what type of stimuli, food we're taking in, literally food, and also in terms of mental stimuli that we put into ourselves at the sattvik, rajasic, and tamasic levels. So it's important that we look at this first. We're looking at the external stimuli, the things that we do outwardly, the activities. Because next in chapter 18, when we come to it, we're going to be looking at the individual personality internally. So it covers in 17 and 18 what's outward in the different qualities of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And in 18, we're going to be covering the personality, the inner personality of buddhi, happiness, sukham, dhruti, renunciation, tyaga, steadfastness. There's about 6-7 constituents of an activity which is from within us that we can make a decision upon of whether we want it to be sattvik, rajasic, or tamasic, or actually understand our personality. That's coming in 18. That's the what do you call it? The preview, the trailer, coming in 18. But it's essential that we know, in order to refine in 18 our inner personality, it's essential we know what we got to do, what we've got to utilize, what is available to us to elevate our inner personality. What are we doing? What are the yagna, tapa, jnana? How do we channelize? How do we serve? What do we offer back? And in order to do that, in the 3 verses that we're covering here, 24, 25, 26, as such, you see, we can do all these activities in a mode of very material sense, in the sense we go about with goodwill in a way. By default, maybe that's our nature. If our nature is predominantly of tamasic, rajasic, we'll go about them perhaps not so good in a great way. But this ensures Om Tat Sat, that idea of carrying this thought in our mind, not mechanically, but more as a reminder, just as we would punctuate our day with a prayer. It's actually just like a shruti. A shruti is a backdrop, like when the musician has a metronome and they listen to the backdrop in order to keep in tune with what they actually are playing. So this shruti is the Sanskrit, the backdrop, that metronome sound, that sound which keeps us in tune with our activities. So Om Tat Sat is that shruti in effect, not mechanical. There's no point going Om Tat Sat in every activity you do. it's a reminder. So when we were talking about in Om, that sound phenomena, the connotation of it beyond the waking dream and deep sleep states as that essential self. So the Om has got that sound, articulate, inarticulate. It reminds you of something beyond, and it can be taken on board in an inarticulate way, that intonation of emotion, and also when we think about it articulately and intellectually. So there's many facets to this value of Om, and it goes across the board, this sound of the world. It's not stuck with this idea of this knowledge of Vedanta. You could have Amen. It could be in Arabic or the Christian. It goes across the whole sound phenomena. So it's not religious or philosophically termed into one. So that's the beauty of it. It's like it's at the beginning of every invocation that we have. So there's many facets to it. Om Tat Sat. So in this verse 25 that we're going to cover, is looking at Sat, reality. Sorry. Yes. Om Tat is looking at that, which we actually also talked about last week a little bit in, why does it say that instead of this? And the Upanishads have a knack of saying, it's not that, it's this. Sorry, it's not this, it's that. Yeah, I'm confusing it, making it worldly instead of something. So previously, one of the things that we talked about last week, if you, just as a recap and reminder, is one of the great ways to perform your prayer is an essential aspect of spiritual evolution is to end your perception with perception. When you carry on that perception and linger, you actually have a ripple effect of desires, which actually take you outwards. And those desires cause you agitation, stress. So to aim for that divinity in you and to understand that divinity is universal everywhere. If one isn't ending one's perception, with perception invariably we're not because of our desires or our lack of direction, then that's the opposite of true prayer. So prayer is not sitting down with your palms folded and that's the punctuation, that's the reminder. You can do the ritual, but it's just the reminder that it's actually the perception you have. At the end of it, you cut it, you go to the next without lingering on the past, without getting anxious about the future. Just take the task in hand, deal with it. And in fact, that ought to bring you the optimum enjoyment of life, pleasure of life in the action, in the journey, rather than in the result. So that is what we're going to look at today. So prior to that, just remember, if you take nothing away from these, just remember, as a spiritual aspirant on your journey, end perception with perception. It's an incredible discipline to have. And maybe we don't reach it in every aspect of our lives, but it's something that, with that in mind, like you might keep on, keep it in mind so you can just, when there's too much going on in one direction, when your mind's wandering everywhere, just cut it there. Take a step back, reflect in your own study, come back to it, end perception with perception. It gives a discipline of self-control to actually perceive what you've got to do next. So it's a grand discipline that actually comes in chapter 2, the idea of Atma. Yes, Jim.
And we often hear this mantra, end perception with perception, and you explained it today that it's not to linger on the past to worry about the future.
Mm.
But you also say it's to plan the future. I'm a little bit lost on that one.
So we say to
Plan the future.
in what context are you saying to plan
So
the
you
future?
just said that we end perception with perception, which means not to linger on the past or worry about the future, but to end the perception and move on to what you've got to do next, which is to do with the future.
Yes. So you're not, what it means is you're not lingering on your past. You've had an experience. You're not lingering on it and thinking, oh, how nice that was, or how terrible that was. You've done the optimum that you can. And then you move to the next, in the sense that whatever needs to be done next, you move on to it. You don't get stuck with the worry or the anxiety of what if that, what that. Just move on to the next. Make the decision. Good, bad, indifferent. Just make the decision. And in terms of the future, in order to successfully end your perception with perception, you do have to have an ideal or goal. An ideal is a goal which is beyond one's own self-interest, can't be within one's own interest alone. So the absolute ideal selfless interest, there's not an interest for yourself at all. It's universal, or even for aspects of your world. But so you can plan the future in the sense that you set an ideal. But when you've set the ideal with your intellect, that that's what I'm heading to, then you allow your mind to focus on that present action. So then when you perform the action, you perform it, but you don't get involved and entangled by it, because there's always a supervision indirectly, which becomes second nature. It's not that you're going, hitting your mind, hitting your activities, am I doing that? It becomes second nature, that you performing the task in hand, you complete it, then you move to the next. But the thing which kills it in life is the worry and anxiety. So you're cutting that. There may be things which are impossible and very difficult and trying to do in life, but you end it there so you actually move on it. You don't allow yourself to linger in the stress, the worry, the anxiety. You don't allow it to linger on a good experience, because the amount of time you just waste on lingering on the past expression, oh, that was nice, that was wonderful, or daydreaming on something, is the amount of time you've not allowed yourself to move forward. And everybody does that. That's the stress of humanity, worry, anxiety. It's always going somewhere else. It's not cutting the perception with perception. So it's not actually allowing one to optimize on one's optimal potential or enjoyment. The stress is, and it's not actually allowing one to build on a construct in oneself of confidence, because you're always cutting it down. So you plan for the future, but you're using all your baby steps to head to that. Even if something's difficult, you just keep making baby step, incremental steps towards something, and you get there. And you cut the perception where it's bothering you. Just keep moving. And that inevitably optimizes the pleasure, the enjoyment. Otherwise, you keep cutting your pleasure of life too. You're also probably cutting your lifespan by the worry and anxiety. So I don't know if that makes sense. So it's a key thing to remember. You're really in a spiritual evolution. If we examine what our spiritual evolution we might like it to be, is without the worry and the anxiety. That's what halts your spiritual evolution. Where does that come from? It comes from one's desires not being fulfilled. And where does that come from? A lack of decision, action, mental stamina of intellect being taken towards something more higher or universal. So there's more agitation when it's focused on I and my. Stress, when you focus it on something bigger, you begin to reduce slowly, slowly. So that gives the better availability of ending perception with perception. No doubt there's lots of intricacies where you can get caught up and involved. So it's that constant trickle of knowledge helps you keep abreast to actually being able to do this. Because naturally, when we're learning, we get into it, we trip up, we make a mess. Like, oh, how did I do that? I was trying my best to end the perception. Before I knew it, my mind went, it's very powerful, it's a master. The mind is the master, it says in the Upanishads.
Paruji, I have an understanding really of, making some sort of faults on the way in a spiritual seeker's path. So if at all, you probably don't go as per probably the scripture says. It is my understanding that the scriptures are still very forgiving. They don't really want you to linger on your past so much, as long as you still really have that goal or objective, which actually is not going to be serving just your purpose, but then actually it serves a higher purpose. So as long as you have that goal in mind, it still doesn't really suggest that you will have to probably go back and kind of work towards correcting all those mistakes that you would have done in the past. I think they just want you to move on, right? And don't really kind of linger around all those things that would have happened in the past and focus only on that end goal. Is that understanding right?
You can use your past to maneuver your present forward. That's the law of karma. But you don't get caught up, as you're saying, with anything in your past. So it holds you back, that anxiety. So as you move on your path, you will resolve your past. Because you see the big picture and you think, oh, what was that stupid thing I kept lingering on? Or, okay, that will remain unresolved because it's not in my capacity to change it. So rather than keep beating my head against something, let's move to where I can do an evolution. You can't always determine what all the other factors are outside of you, but you can certainly determine where you are heading. So that way you can utilize the past and move forward to your present, and your present action, you can move forward to the future, but you're not getting stuck again. If you're just looking at the future, I want the result. That's why it has so many places, karyam karma, just do your obligatory action, not focusing on the fruit, and not without fire, meaning not without full efforts, but your focus on the fruit. In fact, the next verse is coming similar. Your focus on the fruit of action kills it, gives you the stress. When am I going to get it? When am I going to get it? So it actually impoverishes your present activity. So that's no good either. So yes, you're right. Just move on it. No, if you don't have a scripture, many people in society have never looked at any scripture. If you can understand what it is you've got to do to optimize what's dissipating your energy, and without looking at scripture, you might have sussed it out. This is just giving us a construct very quickly to utilize. But if you can do that, it will move you leaps and bounds. So the scripture gives us something to guide us. So it's helpful. And no scriptures telling you to Dissipate your energies in the past, which the mind does. Manas is masterful in that. Yeah. So it just wants you to move on. But if you, the scripture's only telling you what's right inside of you. Om Tat Sat, or Tat Tvamasi, that thou art. It's telling you what you are and you've got to do to see it. Right now it's covered, body, mind, by body, mind, and intellect, in its preoccupation of what it thinks. So we got to get to that within us. So that's that. So I just run over that end perception or perception is a value of self-control. There's a bit more to the self-control of how the technique works, but the principle is that, and your perception, the perception. Good, bad, indifferent, you might have made a mess of something, but you end it there, review it, and move on to what you can do next. Let's go. 25.
Tad iti anabhisandaya halam yajna tapa kriyaha dana kriyascha vividaha kriyante moksha kangshibihi.
Sam, if you'd like to read the verse.
24, 5. Without aiming at fruit, various acts of sacrifice, austerity, and gift are performed by seekers for liberation. Tat.
So that. So he starts here, without aiming at fruit. Throughout the Gita and everywhere you go when you're on, without aiming at fruit. Aiming at fruit alone, rajas. It's like you focus on the material. But you have to act as an individual, otherwise you perish. So you've got to do something with your mind's desires. So act without aiming at fruit, without bothering about the result, basically, without the craving for the various fruits. Yes, you make a goal, but once you've made the goal, get your focus off that. Then it's back on the action. So what's the action we've been on in this chapter? Yagna, dana, tapa. Yagna meaning anybody? Vidya, what is yagna? Within, in one sentence, not long explanation.
Sacrifice.
And
Service and sacrifice.
sacrifice. Service and sacrifice. Dana. What's dana?
Gift.
Gift. Tapaha. Yes, sir. You're about to say?
I was just going to say austerity in the sense of channelizing our direction, thoughts, and so on to something higher.
So the activities, not craving in yag. So we, in order to not crave, yagna, dana, tapaha. That's what we got to do in order to seek liberation. That liberation is that absolute fulfillment. Now somewhere up in the clouds. So here, liberation, tap. So we're often told, there's 4 aphorisms in the Upanishad. If we just take one of them, tatvamasi, that thou art. So that's what the Bhagavad Gita is explaining in 18 chapters. Tatvamasi, that thou art. That's what we're to seek, get hold of. So how can that be God? That God, how can we know that? So the understanding is that self, traditionally, if we've been following the scriptures so far, that self in you is the same self in me, is the same in all. That understanding of that is something universal, which is beyond the limits of our body, mind, and intellect. So right now, we're that heterogeneous variety of human being with this body, mind, and intellect, which differs from person to person, but the Atman, that is one and the same. So if we're focused on the Atman, the identification of the self in all, shifting it off the body, mind, and intellect, there's no problem. You understand we're all different vasanas and desires. You get a comprehension of that. It's an understanding. It takes, it's a practice. You grow with that. Maybe you don't get it straight away. So suddenly somebody confronts you and you have some argument and you forget that that self is there in them. Think of just the differences. But it's that resolution or understanding. Okay, you have your set of vasanas, I have mine. No, they're unparalleled, they don't come together. Let's get on with it. I just need to bypass it, get on. So that mind, if you reference to itself, you see the divinity of it. Same with the intellect, and same with the body. But if you put this mind and my emotions, or this mind and intellect, then all sorts of differences come about, complications and competition, all arising at the level of the body, mind, intellect. So if we can transcend, meaning it's mental, it's a way of thinking, the levels of the body, mind, and intellect, and reach that absolute, that differences are to be resolved. So here he's putting in just one word, without aiming at the fruit. Get onto that. So nothing will happen. Just don't aim at the fruit. You get it perhaps and you're not even interested. Karyam karma. It was a perfect individual. Karyam karma. Sasanyasi. Not without fire. Just not with the aiming of craving of fruit. Mm-hmm.
We talked last time about the translation of tat as that, and it's quite awkward in English, but it's even more difficult if you say that thou art. A more modern translation might be you are Atman. Mm-hmm. Would that be correct?
You say there's many different ways of saying it. And you can say you are Atman. That's an English translation. So if it serves you, you can use that. But in the 4 aphorisms which are generally put forward, they have a layer of becoming, from a piece of advice, an instruction, to a abhyasa, a practice, to a becoming. So that's when that's understood. If you remember in the Vedanta treatise, anybody who wants to reference, it's got different sections of why one might use different things of encouragement to take you in your mind that way. But if you want to say, I am Atman, Aham Brahmasmi, you can say, I am Atman.
So you're suggesting the awkwardness of the translation is important?
No, I'm just suggesting when you understand the translation and it resonates to you in your mind, you think of it in context of what you've got to pursue. But similarly, as you are saying, comfortable to yourself might be, I am Atman. Then simply use that, because that is giving you a comprehension in words which makes it resonate with you. So it doesn't really matter. But why it might suggest this in the Upanishads in that format is because there's implications to what it's trying to get across. But it's semantics, nevertheless. You can use what you want. One's job is to remove vasanas, so resolve differences. It really doesn't matter. And get to your truth. What you say in English or Arabic or Sanskrit or any language whatsoever, if it has the same connotation, which makes it universal, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. No words. So it's as important as one understands it and makes it so the importance is only so it carries you on your journey. If something carries you on your journey, use it. If something doesn't make sense, just shelve it. It's okay. So it's interesting enough, in different contexts, here in the Gita or in the Upanishads, they sometimes just don't explain. They assume you're at that standard. And it's incredibly awkward or difficult for a student who's just beginning and learning, because they're like here, we're talking about karma, bhakti, jnana, yoga. And we go from, like a couple of weeks ago, somebody was asking, why does it include tamas? Can't we just get rid of that one? Because that's not actually yagna, tapa, dana. Why are we including that? So in the Gita, there's so much elaboration of what's what and what's not. But in the Upanishads, they don't go into elaboration. They just say it's dhyana or karma. And your dhyana meaning meditation or karma action. They don't go into, is it unselfish action, selfish action, or selfless action. They assume you understand karma. And so they make it extremely difficult for you to maneuver yourself. You think, karma, what do you mean by karma? But it's assuming that they're talking to that level of student who is in that level of their development where they understand, okay, I've not resolved my vasanas, desires, so I've got to do selfless karma to maneuver myself. They don't even think that you might be somewhere else. Your mind's all over the place. And just give it you like that. So it's a bit you might say it's without much charitable disposition, but they're talking to that level of student. So at each stage, it really doesn't matter. Whatever you are at and whatever you understand or whatever language you're coming from, if it resonates to you, take away all the other bits of it and move on that.
Or just my personal experience, I think sometimes we do have this debate with the circle of my own friends who probably have different schools of thought, different religions. So I keep uttering one shloka from our Upanishads, which says, Ekam Vipraha Prabhuda Vadanti. So it's one God, different thoughts. So I say, as long as probably you are able to attain that self-enlightenment, maybe I think what really works for you probably is the right way. So there is no one prescription that has been defined anywhere saying that this is the guide really to kind of take you there. So all I think our Vedas and Upanishads open up are actually the various paths. It kind of opens up your mind in trying to identify that there are many paths, and which path really suit you is something that you probably would explore yourself. It kind of, I think, gives you the basic foundation, but eventually how you probably kind of walk that path is purely based on you, depending on the foundation, some of those values that probably is the underlying ones.
Yeah, certainly. Certainly. Language plays often a part where it can trip one up as well. So actually, if you remove the language has a limitation, as in this word tat, and get confused about what it means. So if it's easier to say, well, I'm the Atman, take it that way. Another reason for some ways which are put indirectly, often we can't actually accept direct information. So the scriptural text gives us a message indirectly, so that it doesn't say, I am that, because you think, how can you've got to build it up to get that comfort. It's perhaps the difference if somebody said to you in the street, hey, I'm the Messiah. You think, get real. You're not the Messiah. But if suddenly you see this individual's actions all over, wherever, you think, wow, that's something that person's about, something, qualities. So it's an indirect method that somebody sees, oh, from their examples or actions, like, wow, there's something in that person I might inquire about. So just different approaches and have different effects. So one of the things in this verse, so without aiming at fruit, is something we keep in mind. Various acts of sacrifice, austerity, through yagna, tapa, dana, you don't aim at the fruit when you're doing any one of those. It's always focused on the activity. In doing that, one is focused on reaching the truth, liberation. That's what it's pushing you towards. But in pursuing your path of karma, bhakti, jnana, yoga, you can't afford to hang on to the practices of those paths. You've got to keep ending perception with perception and understanding it's like the practices are only there for you at the end stage to let go of, to transcend. So they're taking you, refining you all the way. Remember the pole vaulter example. So you've got to lift yourself up with karma, bhakti, jnana, yoga, refine yourself. But in the end, you've got to drop them to transcend over in via meditation, jnana. So these are all means to an end, not an end in themselves. So if you want to cross over, you've got to get to that height of refinement in order to do it. So it doesn't just become, say you're doing karma, it doesn't just become you get attached to the karma. You got to do it, move on to next. Do it, move on to next. So you don't get involved in the karma or the study. You don't get involved in the study. The study is there for a purpose, to get you to think in how you act, how you digest that information, how you refine your thoughts. That's like the catalyst to refine your emotions, your mind's emotions, the tapa, channelizing your thoughts. So you refine your emotions. Dana, you got to put back, identify with your society. You keep your hand tight in every aspect, on the physical, emotional, material, intellectual. If you don't put back in all of these, you get impoverished. 26. Now let's read.
That means that. That refers to spiritual enlightenment, the state of God realization, self-realization, transcends the states of waking, dream, and deep sleep. In these three states, a human being is confined by his vasanas, thoughts, and desires. Seekers of liberation pursue the spiritual path to exhaust desire, to reach that enlightenment. They follow the various acts of yagna, which is sacrifice, tapa, austerity, and dana, gift, mentioned in the preceding verse. The scripture enjoins sattvika, sacrifice, austerity, and gift, defined in verses 11, 17, and 20 respectively, and not the rajasika and tamasika versions also defined earlier. So
just noted, Rajas and Tamasic aren't really gifts, service, or channelizing your energies to what you're really after. They're sort of pseudo gifts, sacrifice, and channelizing your energies. It's sort of to the outward material, which is actually increasing vasanas in a sense, or desires, or keeping you in the material, not getting over the body, mind, and intellect attachments. So, and tamasic is doesn't maneuver you, keeps you halted, keeps you in indecision, keeps you grounded in one place in procrastination. There's hardly evolution. So he says it here. So getting to liberation, Rajasic and Tamasic aren't doing it. They might get you over certain things, the Rajasic, inject some momentum, but then it's got to be pitched on something more refined. It's using the gross intellect at the very, very best. But a spiritual aspirant wants to cultivate that consciousness, that conscience of subtle intellect. Let's see something more universal rather than the limits. Let's read next. Guru.
I'm just trying to understand. So there is a mention of ultimate state of liberation. What would that be, Maruji? The ultimate state of liberation? Are we talking just about freedom?
Well, freedom's one word. It's like, to describe it, actually you have a Vedanta treatise in this chapter on self-realization. Right from the third part is all talking about the attributes, qualities of liberation. If you want to know what self-realized person is, if you look at chapter 2, Sthita Prajna, it will give you the what's this individual like outwardly, inwardly. So when you say, what is liberation? Well, freedom is one word, fulfillment another, paripurna, full, whole, another.
Can it also be moksha?
Yes, these are all synonymous words. Moksha, liberation, self-realization. There's so many words, absolute bliss. There are so many words of describing liberation. There's so many words. Become the Brahman. Self, Brahman. Nirvana. Everywhere has different word, name, form to try and get across what it's going on about. Absolute, uninterrupted freedom, bliss, ananda. Not short. So, you know, we have a word, shoka, ashoka. I'm giving you this because shoka means sorrow. Ashoka means no sorrow. Generally, it's talking about the world is full of sorrow. In the world, you can get to ashoka by removing the sorrow. You get to no sorrow. But liberation is talking about something beyond those opposites of sorrow and no sorrow. So it's different in kind. So we can only use words and language and attributes to describe what we're talking about. And all the scriptures are talking about this freedom in effect. But these words don't justify what it is. So, like, you know, beyond the opposites, beyond likes and dislikes, without attachment. You know, so all of it's to be explored, so you maneuver on it. But the one thing that one can say is we don't seem to rest content until we always seem to be a little bit, you know, something good happens, we're all right for a moment, then something bad comes up. So that we're always in a flux of change. We don't seem to be absolutely paripurna in this world of things. So we're never going to rest content until we get back to our original nature, which we're calling here liberation, enlightenment, moksha, nirvana, self, atman, Brahman, self-realization, liberation. You know, there's endless ways. Get it?
Thank you.
Let's go.
Those who do not seek the ultimate state of liberation pursue their selfish interest for material gain, but a spiritual seeker pursues the above practices without yearning for fruit. In the final phase of his pursuit, he drops even the lingering desire for enlightenment. Having renounced the last desire, he becomes totally desireless, attains enlightenment.
So remember this idea of the pole vaulter. You go all the way with the pole. But there comes a stage when you cross over. You can't cross over with the pole. So with the practices of karma bhakti jnana, you've got to let go at that stage only. You can't let go when you're halfway up, because you won't get over. So you've got to refine yourself to that stage in your perceptions, emotions, and thoughts, so that there's a natural transformation in jnana. So can't even be attached to this idea of being liberated. It might, so every aspect you're keeping this focus for liberation is, or mumukshatra, desire to liberate. But there comes a stage where you've got to drop that. And I don't get it, because there's an attachment to that. It's all semantics in a way, but it's kind of telling you can't even be attached to the thought of being free. You become free. You let go of it. Ramatirtha, the way to gain anything is to lose it. Let it go. Chodo. And you get it. So this is the method. So you've got to think about the practice of how you refine that and then eventually drop that. So you've got to use it to actually lose it.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
If I may.
Mm.
So when you say, like, for example, to drop karma, like selfless action and so on, if you do that, then I guess what I'm trying to say is when you say we have to drop the practices, how would that so what
You
do you
can't.
do? Huh?
You can't. Effectively, you can't drop the practice. It will drop away when you've got something bigger in place. So naturally, it's like when you were, perhaps not yourself, but each one of us, we used to do all sorts of things when we were little and play with little games and toys and things. Now we're just playing as we've got a bit older with different games and toys. Yeah, but we don't think about those games. Our games and toys may be education, monetary, X, Y, Z, family, whatever. But when you're a child, you're not thinking of those. You're thinking about your soft toys or your bicycle or whatever, different games and plays. But when you've grown to the next stages, you're no longer thinking about those toys. So the same in your karma. You'll be refining your karma. So there'll be certain karmas you won't be doing after a while, because you're doing some other karmas. You've refined it in your mind, because the doors will open up in your desire set, what you've got to pursue next to drop. So it becomes a natural thing. You don't stop doing anything. It happens naturally if you're focusing in the right direction. But if you're focusing, I've got to do karma, and you become like a chicken without a head. It's all worry and anxiety. Got to do the karma, got to do the karma. You won't get the karma done, and you get attached to that, and you don't move out. You just keep doing karma with that flow. And as Leah said, things will refine themselves, and you'll be doing a different thing altogether. You have a different understanding. You won't be able to actually do your karma for gaining the result. You just do the karma. It will bother you if you're trying to just get something out of somebody, something. You do it differently. There's a cause or an ideal in place. So it refines itself as you go along. And it's reminding you, when you get to that stage of few desires, you have to even drop that. Meaning drop it in the sense that it'll fall away because you've refined it. If it's not fallen away, you have to continue till you're in that position. Okay. Okay, makes sense. Okay. Okay. Till next week. Anyway,
Raji.
I
Thank you, Paralji.